beautiful friends, welcome to my channel. Alicia is here and today we are chatting about books I read this summer 2020, which I gotta admit flew by. I don't know about you, but I didn't check off every single of my summer bucket list this year, but that's okay. We are in a pandemic after all and we are still in pretty much lockdown here in New York City, so I hope that your summer was good. I mean, we still have some days left, so regardless of that, I will be sharing books I enjoyed this summer, and there are not too many of them. Some of them I already mentioned in my videos, some of them I did not. So please, without further ado, let's dive in. So first book I read in June, it was City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. And I know Elizabeth Gilbert from Eat, Pray, Love, which I enjoyed, but this is nothing like it. I even didn't feel that it was written by the same author. That's how much this book was unlike I imagined it to be. However, I really glad that I read it. I think it's a very beautiful story of a young girl who comes to New York City in the 40s, and she wants to pursue a career in fashion design on Broadway in a very little theater which her aunt owns. So that was a very interesting story of a girl becoming a woman and her perspective, and you know how things were different back in times, and her first love, her first crush, her friendships, and how she carries those friendships throughout her life. And I think what makes the story also interesting is that we look at it from the perspective of the same character, but being an older lady. So she already pretty much at the sunset, right, of her life, and she's wise, and she learned a lot of lessons throughout her life. That was surprised me because I thought that the story gonna take us only through her young years, but it took us to so much more, and we see the transition in her personality and her views and her mindset. It was very interesting, and the book had everything. It had some drama, it had some romance, it had some history. It would make you laugh and cry truly, and I think it just was a very well written story. I wouldn't agree with everything, with every decision main character, I believe her name is Vivian, made, but I think it was a good story, and I think that's what makes it beautiful. Even though you are not agreeing with the protagonist all the time, you still sympathize with her and you can relate, and you enjoy the story regardless. So that's my take on it, and if I had to rate it on a scale from 1 to 5, I would give it a solid 4 for sure, maybe even 4.5. Then the next book I read, I actually reread it. It was by one of my favorite authors ever, Sophie Kinsella. You probably know her by Shopaholic series, which I read all of it. I love it. But this one is Wedding Night, and it's a story about a girl, Lexi, who actually was expecting a proposal, but her boyfriend of, I believe, 2 years, he didn't propose, so she breaks up with him, and then she kind of rekindles her first love romance with this guy, and they both kind of go for it, and they decide to get married and to have a vacation in Greece. So this whole book will just send you to beautiful beaches in Greece, and to sort of that very vocational mood, very cheerful and very summery. So I think it's a perfect summer read, and on top of that, it's a hilarious story. Every character is so funny, and this book genuinely made me laugh, and it's just very uplifting. And if you're looking for like a nice read which doesn't really involve your brain, I think it's a really good rom-com story. And just the story itself is quite interesting, and I really love this book. I'm very happy that I read it. I loved it first time and I loved it again, so definitely for me it's gonna be 5 out of 5. Then as a book I read in this sort of same genre, you can call it rom-com somewhat. It's This Could Change Everything by Jill Mansell. So I don't believe I read anything by Jill Mansell before, but I heard about her quite a lot on both BookTube and Bookstagram. So I was very intrigued to give it a try, and then I stumbled upon This Could Change Everything, and it was interesting book. So basically the story takes time right around New Year's Eve, and the main character, she finds herself writing a round-robin letter. Like, this is apparently a popular tradition in Britain, when you sort of write down how your year went and like what the things you enjoyed or didn't enjoy. So that was meant for only for her best friend, so she kind of put her heart out, and she said that she really hated her job, and she also hated her boyfriend's mom because she was too nosy, too picky, and she, instead of sending it just to her friends, that letter get accidentally sent to everyone in her contact list, and that screws up with a lot of things. Her boyfriend breaks up with her, obviously, and she loses her job, she loses her apartment, and she kind of has to give it a fresh start. And then also the person who she thought did it, she finds out that actually he didn't do it. So it's an interesting story. I think it's quite well written, and the characters made sense to me. And also, besides the main story, we also have like some little side stories about her friends and people she worked with, so that kind of adds some spice to the book. But I think what I was lacking is this love story. I think that it's kind of escalated only in the end of the book, and it didn't really made that much sense to me. But then again, maybe that's just how I pursue it. Maybe for some people it did, so don't let that stop you from reading. I think I also lacked depth in some scenes. It's like it was a little bit cheesy, but overall I really enjoyed this book. And I think if I had to rate it, I think on my Instagram I rated it at 3.5, but I think I would raise it to 4. I think this book definitely deserves a 4 because it's nice. It's also perfect winter read, actually, because it's set around the holidays time, but I would definitely recommend to read it. Then I thought it was gonna be like a full novel, but it was a very short novel. I think it was like under 40-50 pages, and it was by Gail Anderson Dargat. I hope I pronounced her name correctly, and it's called From Scratch. So it's about middle-aged woman who loses her job at a bakery, and instead she decides to open up her own bakery, and her daughter helps her. And I gotta say, I'm not a big fan of short stories like this. Like, I would rather read a full-on big novel where characters have time to develop, and I wish this was transformed into that, because of its length, it kind of feels very, sped up and cut into like teeny tiny pieces. But regardless, I enjoyed it. I think it was a pretty good read. I don't know if I would necessarily reread it, to be honest with you. Maybe just because of my style. I would probably rate it as 3 out of 5. Just because, characters like some deaths, and also the story was kind of rushed and didn't really, give us a full picture, I would say. Then the next book I read after that, it was the book I actually reviewed on my channel, so please go check it out. I will try to remember to leave a link in the description box down below so you can click and check it out, because it was a full-on video. It was a book by Sarah Geo, which is she's one of my favorite authors, and the book is called All the Flowers in Paris. So the book takes place, as Sarah Geo likes to do, in two different timelines. So one of them is Paris in the times of World War II occupation, and then the other one is modern day in Paris. And one timeline is about French woman and her little daughter, and what kind of horrible things they had to go through World War II. And then another one is about American woman who wakes up and doesn't remember who she is and how she ended up in Paris in the first place. So both stories are very interesting, very intriguing. Again, they're gonna make you laugh and cry. And I think what I enjoyed about this book the most, it's not even the storytelling itself, which was great by the way, but I think the kind of mood it leaves you with. It leaves you in a very uplifting mood, even though the majority of things which go on in the book, they are very horrifying and terrible and sad. But after all, we as human beings have the strength within us and that ability to look on the bright side, and I think that's the kind of message this book provides. And you know, right now in the time of pandemic and lockdowns, I know that a lot of people going through tough times, and I think it's very important to have that inner strength within us to look on the bright side. So I would definitely recommend you reading this book if you are looking for that motivation and inspiration for sure. And then the next book was Regrets by Emmy Banopoulos. I hope I pronounced it correctly. I apologize if I'm not. So this book was sent to me in January, I believe, by Publishing House right when it came out. I think it came out in the end of 2019, maybe January 2020. But anyways, it was standing on my shelf for quite a while, and I just really didn't feel like reading it. I don't know why. But you know, right now I have plenty of time on my hands, so I finally decided to give it a try, and I'm glad that I did, because I actually posted on my Instagram that do I regret reading the regrets, and I do, but I'm glad that I gave it a try, because otherwise I wouldn't know. And that's very interesting, because I really wanted to like this book. I believe it's her first novel. She's written some stories before, so it was her big debut, but I just didn't really relate to the characters, and I think the story could be so much more interesting. And there was quite a lot of like hot, steamy scenes, but they were not satisfying. They were very empty. They were lacking some kind of intimacy, even though I think that author was actually going for the deep connection. So just to give you an idea, the story takes place in the modern New York City, in Brooklyn, and it's a story about a ghost named Thomas and this girl, librarian Rachel, and they fall in love and they have some sort of relationship, even though I'm not sure you can call that relationship. And that intrigued me in the beginning. I was like, well, this story is getting interesting, but it made me disappointed. It's like, you know, when you read a book and you're like, what have I just read? Why did I read it? That kind of how it made me feel. But she has a very unique style of writing, I have to give her that. And from, you know, writing and structural point of view, I have no complaints. The book is very well written. It's just I didn't really relate to characters, lacked storyline, lacked romance, lacked depth. So I would rate it probably 2 out of 5. But maybe this book would interest you. Just because I didn't like it doesn't mean that others wouldn't like it. Just not my cup of tea, to be honest. So moving on to another book. So the next book I read was Is There Still Sex in the City by Candace Bushnell, the creator of Sex in the City. But I expected it to be about, you know, our favorite characters, Carrie, Miranda, Charlotte, and Samantha, but it wasn't. It was actually about Candace Bushnell herself. So she's a woman in her 50s right now, and she moved out New York City for quite a while. She lived in the suburbs, and she's back, and it's kind of her telling how does it really feels, how does it really feel to date in your 50s. And I think that what's interesting about this book is that it's not something which you hear on every corner, because, you know, there are plenty of books about relationship and how dating in New York City sucks, and how you know, dating in any big city really is difficult. But I think that she broke it down pretty well in terms of how does it actually feel for people who are in their 50s, especially for women in their 50s. You know, they have to look a certain way, they have to behave in a certain way. Very interesting. And this book it also has quite a sad feeling to it, like a very, some might even say, depressing. But I think that there is still hope in that book, and I don't necessarily agree with everything she said, because it's kind of like generalization, but I appreciate that she shared her experience with us. So definitely worth reading. Not necessarily the Sex in the City you expect, but I think it's worth reading regardless. I would probably rate it, let me think, I would probably rate it like 3.8 out of 5, so like close to 4. That's how I feel about this book. And then the most recent book I read, which I actually finished reading today, just like an hour before recording this video, so it's very fresh. It's Attachments by Rainbow Rowell. That's my first book by Rainbow Rowell. Haven't heard of her before, but it seemed like my kind of read. And this is about publishing, about magazine in, I would say, 2000s. So it kind of has like that good publishing house feel, and basically it's about quite a weird situation. So this guy Lincoln, he was appointed, he was hired to read other people's emails within the company, the one which are flagged, right? So the one who go against company's policy in terms of, you know, whatever like words they're using, and if they like using curse words and stuff like that. And then one day he comes across those chats of two good friends, Beth and Jennifer, and he knows that it's not right to read those because those are private conversations, but he reads them regardless. And he actually gets attached to those two, and it becomes very entertaining to him to read their chats. And then eventually he falls in love with one of them. Promise no more spoilers. But it's a quite interesting story for sure, and it's like, again, it's very 2000s, you know, emails, flagging and all of that. But I really enjoyed it. I think it was a very good sort of like You Got Mail, Harry Met Sally kind of vibe. I definitely enjoyed it, and I would say if I had to rate it, I would probably rate it 4.5 out of 5. I really enjoyed it. It was good. So yeah, That's what I read this summer, and please let me know if you read anything from the list, and if you have any recommendations for me based on what I talked about in this video. I would be very happy to hear your recommendations. Please don't forget to give me a big juicy thumbs up. Subscribe to me because there are more videos coming to my channel, and also you can find a playlist called Books where I list videos I record regarding books, and I hope to see you in my next videos. See you guys soon. Bye bye.